So you want to buy your first motorcycle. Congratulations. You've just entered the most overwhelming, wallet-destroying, sleep-depriving shopping experience of your entire life. And I say that with complete affection. The problem is, everyone has an opinion. Your uncle says, get a Harley. Some guy on Reddit says anything under a liter is for children. And the dealership guy is looking at you like you're a walking down payment. Today we're going to cut through all of that noise and rank the best beginner bikes from worst to first so you actually know what to buy. C tier. You could do worse, but why would you all write C tier? These are not bad motorcycles. I want to be very clear about that. These are bikes that experienced riders love and recommend constantly. The problem is they're recommending them from a perspective of someone who already knows how to ride. For a genuine beginner, these bikes come with some fine print that nobody reads until they're already in trouble. First up in C tier, the Honda CB 500F and its adventure-ish sibling, the CB 500X. Now I know. Half of you just gasped, and the other half are already typing in the comments. Hear me out. The CB 500F is an incredibly competent, incredibly well-built motorcycle. It's Honda. Of course it is. The build quality is immaculate. The reliability is basically a geological constant, and it will run forever with minimal maintenance. I have nothing bad to say about this motorcycle as a motorcycle. Here's the issue. For a beginner, 500 cc's of parallel twin puts you in this weird middle ground where it's not exciting enough to feel like a reward for learning, but it's got just enough power to get you into trouble when your throttle discipline is still developing. The power delivery is smooth, which is great, but smooth doesn't mean slow, and new riders sometimes confuse the two. There's also the weight consideration. The CB 500F tips the scales at around 430 pounds wet. That's not a lot by cruiser standards, but for someone who's still figuring out low-speed maneuvering and hasn't yet developed that rear brake drag habit we talk about constantly on this channel, 430 pounds starts to feel like a lot when it's tipping toward the pavement in a parking garage. It's also just a little bit boring to look at. And before you come for me, yes, aesthetics matter. You are going to be riding this thing to a coffee shop where that gorgeous stranger is going to see you. The CB 500F looks like a very reliable appliance, which it is, but still. Next in C tier, the Kawasaki Ninja 650. Again, fantastic motorcycle. Again, slight beginner asterisk. The Ninja 650 has been around in various forms since about 2006, and it keeps getting better with each generation. The parallel twin is punchy and characterful. The ergonomics are sporty but not punishing, and Kawasaki's build quality is excellent. The problem is 650 cc's. For someone who's never ridden before, 650 cc's is genuinely more bike than you need in your first 6 months. The power band is manageable, sure, but manageable and appropriate for a beginner are two different things, and I'd rather see you on something that teaches you good habits than something you're constantly managing. Also, insurance on a 650 as a new rider is going to make you wince a little. Not catastrophically, but enough. C tier. Great bikes. Just not the first chapter of your riding story. B tier. Solid choices. No complaints. B tier is where things start getting genuinely fun. These are bikes that are not just acceptable beginner options, they're actually enjoyable. You won't spend your whole first season fighting the machine. You'll actually be riding. First up, the Royal Enfield Meteor 350. If you've never considered a Royal Enfield, I understand. The brand doesn't have the marketing muscle of the Japanese Big Four, and it doesn't have the cultural cachet of Harley-Davidson. What it does have is a whole lot of motorcycle for not a whole lot of money, and a riding experience that is genuinely warm and characterful in a way that modern bikes sometimes forget to be. The Meteor 350 is a cruiser, which means low seat height, relaxed ergonomics, and an engine that's tuned for torque rather than top-end power. For a beginner, this is almost ideal. The single-cylinder 350 produces around 20 horsepower, which sounds modest until you remember that you are a beginner, and 20 horsepower on a lightweight motorcycle is plenty. The engine has that classic thumper quality to it, a low rhythmic pulse that sounds and feels genuinely great. It's not fast. It's not trying to be fast. And that is exactly what a lot of new riders need without even knowing they need it. The downside of the Meteor 350 is that you will outgrow it relatively quickly if you're an aggressive learner. It tops out in a way that starts feeling limiting around the 1 year mark for most riders. But here's the thing, it holds its resale value surprisingly well, the parts and service network has been expanding rapidly, and when you sell it to buy your next bike, you're not going to lose your shirt. Solid B tier. Next in B tier, the Yamaha MT-03. The MT-03 is the naked Street Fighter version of the YZF R3, which means it has the same engine but with upright ergonomics and an aggressive, angular look that honestly turns heads. The 321cc parallel twin revs freely, sounds great with even a modest exhaust upgrade, and produces enough power to be genuinely fun without being scary. It weighs around 362 pounds wet, which is light enough that low-speed maneuvers are actually manageable. The thing I love about the MT-03 as a beginner bike is that it teaches you to ride with your body rather than just relying on power. Because the engine is modest, you start learning to find speed in corners rather than just on the straight. That's a habit that will make you a better rider on every bike you ever own afterward. It's essentially a free masterclass in chassis dynamics, and it just happens to also look really cool parked outside a restaurant. Minor criticism. 300 cc's will feel small to some riders faster than expected, and Yamaha's parts pricing can occasionally make you do a double take, but overall, B tier with strong A tier energy. Last in B tier, the KTM Duke 390. Now this one is spicy. The KTM Duke 390 is the most aggressive motorcycle in B tier, and it is right on the border of A tier, but I'm keeping it here for one specific reason that I'll explain. The single-cylinder 373cc engine produces around 43 horsepower, which in a motorcycle that weighs around 163 kilograms is genuinely quick. Like, quicker than you expect kind of quick. The chassis is sharp and responsive, the brakes are excellent, and the electronics package, including traction control and cornering ABS, is far more advanced than you'd expect at this price point. Here's why it's B tier and not A tier for beginners. The KTM Duke 390 is an exciting motorcycle, and excitement is a double-edged sword when you're still learning the basics. The throttle response is sharp, the power band is eager, and the whole package rewards an aggressive riding style that most beginners haven't developed the skill set to match yet. It's like giving someone their first cooking lesson and handing them a professional chef's knife. Technically the right tool. But there's a learning curve, and the learning curve costs money if you get it wrong. Also, KTM's reliability reputation, while much improved in recent years, still trails behind the Japanese manufacturers. Worth knowing. B tier. A tier. Great picks, hard to go wrong. A tier is where the conversation gets serious. These are bikes that experienced riders would actually choose for themselves if they had to start over, and that's the highest compliment you can pay a beginner motorcycle. First in A tier, the Honda CB300R. Honda took a long look at the beginner bike market, said we can do this better, and produced the CB300R. It is a masterclass in what a beginner bike should be. The single-cylinder 286cc engine produces around 30 horsepower, which hits the sweet spot of enough power to teach you throttle control and chassis dynamics without ever feeling like it's going to launch you into a hedge. The naked Street Fighter styling is genuinely sharp. This is not a bike that looks like a compromise, it looks intentional. The CB300R sits low, handles predictably, stops well thanks to a single-channel ABS system, and costs less to insure than almost anything else in this tier. Honda's reliability record on this platform is about what you'd expect from Honda, which is to say it is essentially indestructible if you do basic maintenance. Parts are everywhere. Dealers are everywhere. If something goes wrong, and it probably won't, you are never going to be stranded waiting 6 weeks for a part from a warehouse in a country you can't find on a map. The one criticism I'll level at the CB300R is that the single-cylinder character, while smooth, lacks a little bit of soul. It's tremendously competent and just slightly clinical. But for a beginner who is still figuring out clutch control and counter steering, clinical is honestly not the worst thing in the world. Rock solid A tier. Next, the Kawasaki Z400. The Z400 might be the most underrated beginner bike on the market right now, and I will die on this hill. The parallel twin 399cc engine produces 45 horsepower, which is more than the CB300R and more than the Ninja 400. And before you panic, no, that is not too much power for a beginner. Here's why. The power delivery is so linear and so predictable that it never catches you out. It builds smoothly, progressively, and gives you enough time to think before it gets to the top of the rev range. Compare that to something with a peaky power band, and you'll understand immediately why delivery matters as much as quantity. The Z400 is also lighter than most bikes in this class. At about 167 kilograms wet, it's flickable and responsive in a way that builds confidence rather than caution. The naked styling is aggressive and modern without being intimidating, and the price point sits comfortably in the range where you're not going to have a panic attack every time you park it in a busy area. Kawasaki has also done something quietly brilliant with the Z400's ergonomics. The riding position is upright and natural without being either cramped or stretched, which means you can do a 90-minute commute without arriving feeling like you just competed in a yoga event you didn't train for. Genuinely excellent motorcycle. A tier strongly. And now the jewel of A tier, the Suzuki SV650. The SV650 has been around since 1999, and it has spent the last 2.5 decades earning one of the most loyal followings in motorcycling. This is not an accident. The 90-degree V twin 645cc engine is one of the most characterful power plants in the beginner and intermediate bike category. It has low-end torque that pulls smoothly from almost nothing, a mid-range that feels meaty and satisfying, and a top end that reminds you there is real engine here without ever becoming genuinely threatening. The SV650 is the bike that experienced riders consistently point to when they say, "I wish I'd started on this." And I think the reason for that is the engine teaches you something that smaller bikes can't quite replicate. It teaches you to feel the motorcycle. The V-twin character communicates through the bars, through the pegs, through the seat. Riding an SV650 feels like a conversation rather than just an operation. At around 202 kilograms wet, it's not the lightest option on this list, and the seat height of 785 millimeters might give shorter riders a moment of pause. But the weight is carried low and centrally, which means it handles better than the numbers suggest. Insurance costs are remarkably reasonable, given the engine size, because actuarial tables know this bike attracts sensible people rather than thrill chasers. Resale value is outstanding. Parts are cheap and everywhere. Reliability is basically legendary. If A tier had a valedictorian, it's the SV650, just barely keeping it out of S tier, and the reason for that will make sense in a second. S tier, the goats of beginner bikes. S tier, the best of the best. The bikes that make you look like you did your homework because you watched this video. There are 2 motorcycles in S tier and 1 honorable mention that I cannot in good conscience leave out. First, let's talk about the Kawasaki Ninja 400. The Kawasaki Ninja 400 is, in my honest and extremely correct opinion, the single best beginner motorcycle you can buy right now. And I don't say that lightly because I am constitutionally opposed to being boring, and the Ninja 400 is the opposite of boring. The parallel twin 399cc engine makes 45 horsepower in a package that weighs about 167 kilograms wet. Those numbers combine to produce a power-to-weight ratio that puts a lot of middleweight bikes to shame while remaining completely manageable for someone who got their license last Tuesday. The chassis is derived from Kawasaki's Supersport technology, which means it corners with a confidence and precision that you simply do not expect from a bike in this category. The brakes are dual-channel ABS as standard. The ergonomics split the difference between sporty and comfortable in a way that works for both canyon runs and daily commuting. It looks incredible. Seriously, the Ninja 400 looks like a proper sports bike and not like a starter bike that someone painted to try and fool you. Here's what really separates the Ninja 400 from everything else on this list. It has a ceiling that is high enough that you will not outgrow it quickly. Most riders spend 1 to 2 years on a beginner bike before moving up. The Ninja 400 will keep the average beginner genuinely engaged and challenged for every single one of those months. When you take it to a track day, and you will take it to a track day, it will not embarrass you. When you take a more experienced rider for a canyon run on it, they will not pity you. They will be fighting to keep up and wondering quietly why their bigger bike doesn't feel this agile. S tier, undisputed. Next, the Yamaha YZF R3. If the Ninja 400 is the practical S tier choice, the R3 is the S tier choice for people who close their eyes at night and see Valentino Rossi's number 46. The 321cc parallel twin makes 42 horsepower, which is slightly less than the Ninja 400, but the R3 wraps that power in full sports bike bodywork and a riding position that puts you in genuine racing tuck territory. This is as close as a beginner is going to get to a MotoGP experience without requiring a medical waiver. What keeps the R3 an S tire rather than dropping it on the basis of practicality is Yamaha's execution. The power delivery is smooth and linear. The chassis is sharp and communicative. The brakes are excellent. And the learning curve on this bike is steep in all the right ways, meaning it pushes you to develop technique rather than covering for your mistakes with electronic safety nets. When you eventually ride a bigger sports bike after cutting your teeth on the R3, you are going to feel prepared in a way that other beginner bike riders simply aren't. There is also something to be said for the pride of ownership on an R3. Yamaha's build quality and finish is genuinely premium at this price point, and the bike photographs beautifully, which matters more than anyone is willing to admit out loud. Minor practical note. Full fairing means crash repairs hurt more than on a naked bike. If your parking lot confidence is still developing, factor that into your thinking. But in terms of pure riding experience as a beginner and intermediate tool, the R3 is absolutely S tier. And now the honorable mention that I promised you. The Honda Grom. The Honda Grom is a 124cc miniature motorcycle that produces somewhere around 9 to 10 horsepower, and it is secretly one of the most important beginner vehicles ever built. I'm not putting it in full S tier because it has a top speed that will make highway on-ramps a genuine adventure and not the fun kind. But I will say this, if you live in a city, if you're small in stature, if you're genuinely nervous about getting on a full-size motorcycle for the first time, or if you just want something that makes you laugh every single time you ride it, the Grom is the answer. It is impossible to ride a Grom without grinning, scientifically proven. Also, the aftermarket support for the Grom is absolutely unhinged. There are people building Groms with custom frames, turbochargers, and swapped engines from other bikes. The Grom community has that special flavor of unhinged creativity that I respect deeply. Honorable S tier mention. The bikes you need to stay away from all right. We need to have a talk. Because for every genuinely great beginner bike on this list, there are about 4 that people will recommend to you that will absolutely ruin your early riding experience. And I feel morally obligated to name some of them. First, any 600cc Supersport from the early 2000s that some guy is selling for $2,000 on Facebook Marketplace with the phrase "runs great" just needs some love in the description. I am telling you right now, do not do this. The early 2600cc sports bike market, your CBR 600s, your R6s, your GSXRs, these are incredible motorcycles. They are also motorcycles with aggressive riding positions, peaky high revving engines, race-derived suspension, and absolutely zero tolerance for beginner mistakes. The reason they are $2,000 is not that they are a deal. It is that someone learned this lesson the hard way before you. Second, big cruisers from brands you've never heard of. I'm not going to name names because my comment section is already enough of a war zone, but you know who you are, and so does your insurance company. If a brand entered the market primarily to sell to people who wanted a Harley-Davidson without paying Harley-Davidson prices, the quality control and long-term reliability is almost always a reflection of that business model. Buy a known quantity. Your first bike is not the time to be a pioneer. Third, and this one is going to cost me some subscribers, old two-strokes. I know they sound incredible. I know that the RZ500 or the RD350 is the coolest thing you've ever seen. I know you watched a YouTube video of one ripping down a mountain road and your soul left your body. I get it. I genuinely get it. But a two-stroke engine from 1980 or 1982 with a carburetor that hasn't been touched since 1994 and a power band that appears with approximately zero warning is not the foundation on which a beginner should be building their riding skills. Ride them later. Ride them after you have a few years and a solid mechanical understanding. Then ride them and love them, but not first. And finally, the guy at the dealership who takes one look at you and says something like, "You seem like you could handle a leader bike from day one." That man is not your friend. That man is a salesperson with a quota. Your instinct when you hear that should be to smile politely and immediately leave. A leader bike from day one is how you end up becoming a statistic that gets cited in a YouTube video about motorcycle safety myths. No. Okay, let's bring this home. If you want the tier list in 30 seconds, here it is. C tier, the CB 500F, and the Ninja 650, perfectly good bikes with beginner asterisks. B tier, the Royal Enfield Meteor 350, the Yamaha MT-03, and the KTM Duke 390. Solid picks that will genuinely serve you well. A tier, the Honda CB 300R, the Kawasaki Z400, and the Suzuki SV 650. Excellent motorcycles that experienced riders would actually choose. An S tier, the Kawasaki Ninja 400, and the Yamaha YZF R3, with a deeply affectionate honorable mention for the Honda Grom. If you want my single recommendation, if you put a gun to my head, and please don't, I would tell you to buy a Kawasaki Ninja 400 and never look back. It is the most complete package available for a beginner rider at any budget level. You will learn on it. You will enjoy it. You will not be embarrassed by it. And when you eventually sell it, and you will eventually sell it, you will sell it quickly and for a reasonable price. Whatever you buy, please wear your gear. Please take the MSF course if you haven't already. Please ride as if no one can see you. And please, for the love of everything, cancel your blinker. I'll catch you in the next one. Fact, the Kawasaki Ninja 400 outsells its closest competitor by a margin significant enough to make other manufacturers deeply uncomfortable at board meetings, and yet somehow someone in every comment section still argues that you should just start on a leader bike. Some things will never change. Goodbye.